Hello, music people! Today, we're going to learn about intervals. Intervals are basically the distances between two notes. They could be the same note, they could be different notes, but the idea is that if you understand intervals, it will help you to sight read music, it will help you to write out music that you're hearing, it will help you to play back something that you maybe want to learn how to play. It should be no surprise to anyone that the higher you go on a musical staff, the higher in pitch something is. Intervals are basically to say, how much higher are we going for the next note? Or how much higher is the note that my partner is playing while I play the lower note? So we've got two examples here. One way to look at intervals is one note after the other, like if you're playing a melody. And another way is if maybe you and someone else are playing two different notes. What's the distance between the two notes that you guys are playing? So let's start with a melody. Intervals that are in one note after the next are called melodic intervals. The question is, what is the distance between the first and the second note you play? And what's the distance between the second and third? And third and fourth? Each of these answers would be the interval that occurs between the two notes. And the way you find out is pretty simple. You just count. You count the lines and the spaces between the two notes. So always start with the first note being counted as 1. Above that we have a line, that's 2. Above that we have a space, that's 3. And that brings us to the B, number 4. So we have a fourth between F and B. Okay, give it a try now. What are the distances between the next two notes and the last two notes? All you have to do is count. And here are your answers. B to C is a second, and C to F is another fourth. Now, you can count the distance between two notes that are stacked on top of each other too. We call this a harmonic interval. When you're playing a harmony, that means two different notes are sounding at the same time, usually by two different musicians. Say you are playing the bottom note and you have a partner playing the top note at the same time. The question is, what's the distance between the note you're playing and the note that your partner is playing? Well, same rule applies, just count up. Yep, this one's another fourth. That should be no surprise because it's still F to B. And the fact that it's a harmonic interval doesn't change that. Okay, I just want to point out that this next part exists, but we're not going to go into it today because things would normally get a whole lot more complicated here. Because we have flats, sharps, and natural versions of the same note, like B flat, B natural, and B sharp, intervals that are the same number still might sound different from one another. Remember that flats lower a note a little bit, sharps raise a note a little bit, so obviously the distance becomes a little different, though the number is still the same. Listen to these three examples played. Here's F to B flat. Here's F to B. Here's F to B sharp. They're all different distances between them, but they're still fourths. So, in other words, we can talk about intervals more specifically by saying what their quality is. This means that we can call them major, minor, or perfect, or other things to say exactly what the distance is. If this part is a little confusing to you, don't worry about it right now. We won't learn about qualities for some time, but I did want to mention that they existed. Okay, on to our first interval. We're just going to learn a few today. This puppy has nothing to do with the intervals, but I thought he was cute, so I included him. On the left side of the puppy, you'll see the treble clef. On the right side, you'll see the bass clef. They're the same thing, but I've written them out differently for people who play different kinds of instruments. All right, let's start with the number. What's the distance between the bottom note and the top note in each of these intervals? If you counted 8, you're absolutely right. Can you think of another name for this distance that you may have heard in class? That's right, an octave. Makes sense, right? An octopus has 8 legs, an octagon has 8 sides. An octave is a distance of an eighth between two notes. So I'm going to play a couple octaves for you, and I want you to see if you can think of a song that it reminds you of. Come up with anything? How about this one?
I ho, I ho,
in this case, the dwarves are singing an octave in Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Hi-ho is an octave. We've also got Somewhere Over the Rainbow. And Chestnuts Roasting on an Open Fire from the Christmas song. So if you ever hear something that reminds you of somewhere or chestnut, it's an octave. Okay, next one. What is this interval number? Count from the bottom to the top. In this case, B flat to F is an example of a fifth. It's a perfect fifth. The second note is on the fifth liner space up from the bottom note. I've only got one song to use for a perfect fifth, but it's a pretty good one. Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. The first two different notes, twinkle, twinkle, are a perfect fifth. And though there are many more intervals, we're going to do just one more today. What have we got here? Count from the bottom note to the top note. This one is a fourth. It's awfully close to a fifth, so count carefully. And don't forget to count the bottom note as one. I've got two songs to help you remember what a fourth sounds like. The first one. The first part, Here Comes the Bride, is a perfect fourth. But Amazing Grace works well too. May is a perfect fourth. So to wrap things up, we know three different intervals by ear now. Perfect fourth, perfect fifth, and perfect octave. If you hear one or the other, you can check your work by trying to sing the rhythm of that song using the two notes that you're hearing. For example, does that sound like a perfect fourth? Well, let's try Here Comes the Bride. No, that's a little too high. Maybe it's a perfect fifth. Let's try Twinkle Twinkle. Yeah, that sounds right. It's a perfect fifth. Now let's try it. I'm going to leave this slide up so you have the clues on the screen. I'm going to play 5 different intervals for you, and it's your job to say which one you think it is, based on which song you think it resembles best. Here's the first one. That's a perfect fifth. See? Try another. Number 2. This one's an octave. Number 3. This one's a perfect fifth. Number 4. This one's a perfect fourth. And last but not least, number 5. This one's another perfect fourth. How'd you do? Just like anything else, this takes practice. Don't get frustrated if you're not getting it right away. For some of us, this comes really easy, and for others, like myself, we have to work hard at it. What I'd recommend doing is listening for these intervals as you listen to music on the radio, on your iPod, and when you think that you hear them, check your work by singing one of the songs that you use to identify that interval. Good luck.